What's up, everybody? I'm Flash. This is One Man's Opinion, the show where we cover just about everything. And today, we've got a Forgotten Gem movie review coming at you. I wanted to do this for so many reasons. Number one, it's been a while since we've talked about a movie, and that's the reason I made the channel, and I love doing movie reviews. Unfortunately, my busy schedule, these have been a little tougher to do, but because of the weather outside and how cold it's been, I've had a couple days to be here at home, and so I'm really excited to be able to do a movie review. I wanted to do this one because me and my wife watched it the other day, and we had a blast watching it, and honestly, I haven't watched it in years, and with the theme of the movie and the way the weather's been recently, it kind of just fit like a glove, and I thought, well, this would be perfect to do a Forgotten Gems on. Now, does it really get the Forgotten Gems category? I don't know. On one hand, I feel like anybody who really enjoys comedies is very aware of this movie, has probably seen it and enjoyed it the same way that I have, but at the same time, it feels like maybe there's a new generation of movie watchers out there who haven't had a chance to see this, who haven't had a chance to sit down and enjoy it, and doesn't realize how good or heartfelt or smart a comedy can be. Now, before I go any further, I do want to point out the new setup here. I'm very excited. So, if you guys like what you see, or you have any questions or comments to make about the new backdrop, it's still in the works, but this will probably be the setup for the foreseeable future. I'm just very excited to finally have some stuff up in the background and be able to get some of my stuff in view, and make it feel a little bit more like my home and the place that I want to be making videos. So that's very, very exciting for me to have that going on. This movie, made in 1987, stars John Candy and Steve Martin. Honestly, it's so weird because you watch these movies as a kid and you're like, you remember the laughs. You remember how funny it was. You remember how goofy it was. But when you watch it as an adult and you haven't seen it in a long, long time, it really struck me with how intelligent the comedy is. And look, I'm not taking a shot at anybody here because I love Adam Sandler and I love Will Ferrell, and I've sat down and enjoyed many of their movies. Many of their movies I can sit and quote, and I'm just using those two as an example, but comedies today aren't nearly as smart as comedies then used to be. This comedy isn't just funny, it's not just goofy, and it's not just in your face like, hey, this is when you're supposed to laugh, look, we're saying stupid things. It's so much more genuine than that. It's so much more everyday and understanding, and even these characters are way more complex. I was taken way aback by how true these characters were. Steve Martin plays a guy who is so relatable and so real in this, in that he is supposed to be the straight man here. He is supposed to be the more serious character, but he's not just like a douche for no reason. He really is kind of pushed to the edge a lot. He's had a run of bad luck, but he still has a good heart. It goes out of its way to show no matter how fed up he is with John Candy's character, when John Candy needs help, he helps him. And it's kind of like the other way around too. Even though John Candy is the more heartfelt guy, he is also the one that seems to kind of screw up a little bit more. That is also reflected when Steve Martin really needs help in the movie. John Candy's there to lend him the hand no matter how fed up he is with how stick in the mud Steve Martin's character can be. There's also so much heart in this. It's not just like a really goofy, stupid movie with very little point where it seems like the story comes second. I think a lot of times in comedies nowadays, the story is second. They just want to have two guys in a comedy movie kind of playing off of each other, kind of mad-lipping a little bit, kind of just bouncing off one another, and everybody loves when actors riff, and when they strike gold with comedy, they do or say something that's out of left field and it cracks everybody up. We all love that, yes, but story was not secondary in this comedy. There's so much heart that I had forgotten about. There's so much depth to these characters and to the story, and by the end of it, there are at least a couple times in this movie that will jerk on your emotions, pull on your heartstrings a little bit, especially if you've already seen the movie before. That's what I think is really brilliant about it, is even if you've already seen the movie, then moments at the beginning of the film have more impact because you know the outcome and you know where both of these characters are coming from. In particular, John Candy's character, who has a more tragic and more sad background. And I'll try not to get into it too much in case there are people out there who have never had a chance to see it. If you're a fan of comedy movies, I highly suggest you give Plane, Trains, and Automobiles a chance, because it's not just a hilarious comedy. There's a lot of downtime. There's a lot of serious conversation. There's a lot of, and I don't want to sell it wrong, it is a comedy at its heart, but there's such a good message to it. There's so much heart in it that it really just blew me away. And I almost forgot how smart comedies used to be, how well written comedies used to be, and it wasn't just let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, and we'll have people act really stupid and like fall down a staircase to get our yucks. I mean, there is some of that physical humor in this movie, but there's so much more that's funny just in conversation, just in watching Steve Martin's mannerisms versus John Candy's. We lost John Candy too soon. Honestly, the dude is a phenomenon. He is so good in this film, and he's so good in so many of his other films. There are a few like cameos, but basically those two have this movie to themselves. You do see people like Michael McKean, Kevin Bacon. There's also the likes of Larry Hankin, who makes an appearance. You've probably seen him. He's usually not the star of a movie, but you would recognize him. He had a part on Seinfeld for a little while, and has popped in and out of other movies, throughout the decades. And so you have these people that I remember watching it and being like, Kevin Bacon's in this movie, and he's only in it for like a scene. But yeah, you have these people pop up in the movie, and they all serve a really great purpose. Eddie McClurg, whose name I may be butchering, but you would recognize her from also having small roles in other movies, in particular Home Alone. She has one scene also, but is absolutely hilarious in that scene. And so you have people who kind of bounce in and out of this movie and make the movie what it is. But at the heart of the movie, it is a story about two men trying to get home for Thanksgiving. I appreciate that it's like a Thanksgiving movie too, because it doesn't seem like we get many of those. They're trying to get home from Thanksgiving, but due to the weather, due to all the ice and all the snow and everything, they keep getting delayed on flights. They end up taking planes, trains, and automobiles to try to get home for Thanksgiving in time. And it's such a sweet story, and honestly, it's hilarious. It's an amazing film, and it really brought me back to a time when I think people who wrote movies cared more. Like, genuinely, I'm not saying that we don't get movies today where the people involved don't care about them. I'm not saying that that's entirely extinct, but I am saying that certainly the majority of films now are just, crank it out. Just crank out the next one in line, whether it's Marvel or Disney or, whether it's Warner Brothers or, with the DC movies, and it goes beyond comic book movies with the Indiana Jones and the Star Wars, and I know a lot of these are Disney properties, but that seems to be the way it goes, which is why lately, in the last few years, I find myself watching more and more horror movies, because I think horror's going through a renaissance right now, and a lot of those movies have a lot of care and effort into them. It does take you back, but I would say by and large, certainly, it used to be that every movie that was made, most movies anyway, were made with a lot of heart and with a lot of people who really cared about the project and wanted it to mean something. If they wanted it to be funny, they wanted it to have heart, they wanted it to have a message, they wanted it to be a family thing, even though it does devolve at times into a very aggressive sort of comedy with like a lot of cussing. Those scenes are few and far between, and they serve a purpose. Like when Steve Martin loses control in this movie, he does it at one time because everything has built up to that point. And so even though you have that moment and people will watch and be like, oh, that's hilarious. I love when Steve Martin goes on that rant in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles. People will talk about that even today, because up until that point, you had very little to no cussing in the movie, and finally he reaches that boiling point, and you can see it in the way he carries himself, you can see it by his clothes, you can see it by his attitude, and it finally comes out of his mouth, and his frustrations and everything are vented in one moment. Even those moments have such a build-up and such a payoff, so I really, really appreciate it. I could go on and on about how good the writing was, about how good the acting is, about how much heart and effort went into this movie, but honestly, I think it's a perfect comedy, and I think it's one that has absolutely stood the test of time, especially when, so much of the country is having so much cold weather issues right now. it's amazing that this one can still ring so true to so many people. And just because it took place in the past and technology has changed over the years doesn't mean we can't all still resonate with like trying to be somewhere on time and things outside of our control stopping us from being able to do that, from being able to be with family, from being able to be where we're the happiest, putting us into situations where we're having to deal with people we don't want to deal with. All of these things are still very relevant today. And on top of that, it's still hilarious. On top of that, the writing's still good. On top of that, the story's still amazing. I think Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is one of the best comedy movies ever put to film, and I highly suggest anyone who's stuck at home and not able to get out because of the weather, if you just want to watch a movie, whether you've seen it before because it's something from your childhood or it's something from your past, or if you've never seen it and this review has made you curious, I highly suggest you go give Planes, Trains, and Automobiles a watch. I'm giving it a 99 out of 100, only because I don't believe in giving 100s out of 100s. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this film, if you've seen it. Let me know what your thoughts on it. Is it as good as I'm making it out to be? Do you have issues with it? If so, I would love to hear what those issues are and have a conversation down in the comments below. If you've never seen it, I highly suggest you go find a way to watch it. You come back here and let me know what you thought about it. Is it as good as I made it out to be? Or was I kind of blowing it out of proportion a little bit? I would love to hear those comments, so please come back and let me know how you feel about the film, or just go ahead and talk to me down in the comments right now. If you disagreed with me, you didn't like Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and you thought this was a horrible review, don't get mad. Remember, this is just one man's opinion. Thanks.